and shares wounds with us. Amen. So today, as we celebrate the feast of St. Thomas, we're going to look at portions of our Gospel reading in John chapter 20. You'll remember that Thomas had come to the disciples who had seen Jesus in the resurrected form, and Thomas had been absent. We're not told why. But Thomas says to the other disciples, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it." What is it about Thomas's own personal history that makes it so difficult for him to trust what other disciples have told him? These are men and women with whom he has lived in close proximity for the past 3 years, and yet he struggles to take their word for what they've experienced. There must be some sort of wounding in his own life that really makes him personally hesitate to give credibility to anybody else's words. Has he been abandoned sometime in his life? Have people made promises which they haven't made good? We don't know, but we do know that there is something that is of a deep kernel of pain. It's also very interesting that Thomas doesn't say, "When I see something supernatural," in other words, like Jesus walking through a locked door and suddenly appearing in the room. He's not looking for that. He's looking for the deepest vulnerability as a proof of Jesus' resurrection. So as we know, a week later the disciples were together, Thomas was with them, and we read, "Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' And then he said to Thomas, 'Put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe.'" Now, I don't know about you, but certainly for me, if I had the sense that Jesus had overheard my comment to the other disciples, which obviously in this case he had, and then Jesus does this extraordinary thing, and we don't know how, that his molecular structure seems to be able to come through locked doors and appear in tangible reality in this room. I would have said to Jesus, "It's okay, it's fine. I have now seen that you are risen and that this is a supernatural, immortal body because you've appeared in this room without any door opening." But no, Thomas still has this need to encounter the risen Christ in the woundedness, to touch the wound. It's almost as if by touching the wound, Thomas is being given permission to acknowledge his own woundings. There's a credibility that sometimes arises when we meet one another in our shared woundings. Somehow it brings us to a deep level of bonding that supersedes anything that is linked to a joyous occasion or celebration, lovely as those are, and memorable as those often are, and lovely stories that come out of that. The bonding that comes from shared suffering is much, much deeper and seems to last for a lifetime. Perhaps we need to acknowledge as well that much as we sometimes ask God to show divine presence to us in something extraordinary, in something supernatural, in something strong and bold, and divine. Maybe we're in a place of wounding at the moment where actually it's in the seeming, and it really is seeming weakness of wounding that God is wanting to meet us. God wants us to touch in on how God is suffering, and through that mutual acknowledgement, not of weakness, but of vulnerability, of the willingness to suffer with, that we start encountering what the meaning is of resurrected life. Resurrected life doesn't transcend suffering, brings into suffering meaning and hope. So thanks be to God for Thomas, for his courage to face his own need and vulnerability, and for Jesus to have the acknowledgement of his wounds. This must have been so meaningful too. May we give meaning not only to our lives, but to God's, by allowing the place of wounding, the experience of wounding, to be invested with a power that is resurrection life. Amen.